Hello and welcome to Spotify Pop Classics Roundtable. I'm JJ Italiano and I'm joined here today by Carly Rae Jepsen, Cecilia Winter, and Talia Kraines from Spotify's editorial team. Today we're going to be talking about our newest selection of classic albums of the streaming era in the genre of pop. We're talking about the streaming era, which we're defining as from 2015 to present. The second thing we're talking about is pop music as a genre. So there's a lot of conversation around pop music and popular music or pop music and hits. We're really hyper-focused on the genre of pop music for this particular collection of classics. And I'll pass it to Cecilia to talk a little bit about what that criteria is.
First of all, how it affected the zeitgeist. How relevant was it to what else was happening in pop culture and pop music at that time? The second piece was how transformative it was to the genre. Like, how did it affect pop music going forward? And then we also looked at overall critical acclaim or cultural consensus. We also added two new criteria that we haven't actually used in past iterations of classics. We looked at overall execution of the project. So pop often has this collaborative element where there might be multiple producers, songwriters, and artists working on a single track. So overall execution essentially measures like how pristine that final recording is and how well the artist executes on that collaborative element. And then finally, the last criteria that we use is called artist storytelling. And what that means for us is how well did the artist pull together all these different influences behind one singular, unique narrative.
It was a big challenge for us, I think, in making the list.
We've basically been debating these albums for the last year. We've been talking a lot about pop music versus popular music versus hits. And we've landed on these 30 pop genre albums that we believe are era-defining classic albums.
I want to go just around maybe for all of us to talk about, because we talked a little bit about the criteria, but what makes a classic pop album to you?
The beautiful thing about a pop album, or any album for that matter, that can make you feel connected to other people and make you want to participate in the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, just to sort of feel connected. I think that's the gift of it.
It's an album that can transport your emotions immediately somewhere. So whether it making me run to a dance floor and explode in joy, or I'm in my room listening to it, being annoyed at a boy, feeling sad, I'm transported to a world.
When I'm thinking about the pop albums that are classics to me, all of them both perfectly reflect something that's happening in music culture at that time, while also expanding the genre.
I think about how it reflects on the time. And like pop and classics, they kind of at odds with it, because pop, I think, is intrinsically ephemeral. It's of the moment. And a great pop album is really accurately like of the moment. The albums that we reflect on as being classics did that really well, whether that's a sonic similarity, what was going on at the time, or an emotional or intellectual similarity that's going on at the time.
My must-listen album from Pop Classics is Suzanne Sundfør's 10 Love Songs. Suzanne is this really experimental Norwegian artist who self-wrote and produced this incredible album, which is all about the compulsions and obsessions of love. She doesn't normally make pop music, but this is a synth pop album that glistens with chaos. There's a song on it called Kamikaze that makes you feel like you're being murdered. Everything about it is incredible. It's emotionally intense. Many people may not have heard this album, so I beg you, if you haven't, go listen to it right now.
The way that we talk about pop albums is a lot different now than it was prior to 2015.
I feel like pop itself, it is very like polarizing. And it is really lovely to see the kind of change that has happened from it being some sort of like a more frivolous genre to something that is seen as hard and is taken seriously and is critiqued as such. So I've enjoyed watching that kind of shift.
We've done this previously with hip hop and R&B, but pop music is similar but slightly different. But when we were talking about, okay, well, when's the moment that people really started talking about albums with the same kind of like critical lens that you would, talk about indie music? All of us were like, well, emotion, for sure. And so it's one of the reasons why we are so excited to speak to you and have you involved in this process.
Cheeks are going to start burning.
Was there a point like after the release of Emotion or in the subsequent years since where you realized like, wow, I've made something that's kind of changed the game?
Oh no! I mean, I'm still kind of like taking this in right now. I think that the idea of knowing what you're making when you're making it, or how it will resonate with other people, is a really tricky thing to do. I knew my motivations and my goals for that album was, after having put out like a single like Call Me Maybe, it was really important to have a body of work, like an album that I could be proud of. And I was also really at that time trying to define what it was that I had to offer to pop music. And I too was one of those people who either hated or loved a song as it appeared, and I wanted to understand what it was that I loved and try to offer more of that.
That's super cool.
My friends looked down on me pretty much for liking pop. I feel like pop music, if you told people you liked pop music, you were thought of as less valued, I think, which feels like a dramatic statement. But over time, pop fans found each other online. Gradually, as time ticks by, we get to 2015, and there's this moment where everybody is talking about pop music critically. And it might be that you're the reason why. Not to, again, be dramatic.
What an intro. I don't know about that.
Pop is definitely experiencing a great moment right now where what used to be one of the more restrictive genres, both in terms of how you could create music and how you could release it, has now become one that's way more experimental, way more amorphous, but still bound together by this texture and like this feeling that we all know when we hear.
How has social media affected pop music?
Fandoms have really like found a place to live online. Now, like, you don't have to have a big commercial hit to be able to find your audience. And crucially, that audience can find each other.
But I also think there's something really cool about just the discovery of new artists that social media has allowed. The idea that you could just go in your phone and write something and have an audience immediately. Like, that's so magical. I think being a pop writer and a pop artist at the same time is why right now we see so many artists who are writers actually winning in this lane, because they are writing something and singing something that only they could do. And if you transferred that song to somebody else, it wouldn't work as well. And I think that is like a key ingredient to not just a pop song working, but us all as the audience buying it and believing it and feeling like there's some authenticity to it as well.
Totally.
Yeah. And I feel that is part of the last 10 years in the streaming era as well. Pop artists have been given more room and more acclaim. People believe they can write.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's refreshing. We're going in the right direction. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy that we can hear it reflected in the changes in the albums.
I felt like there was like a lyrical shift that I observed and that was happening with the songs that were kind of performing. It's different than now. And it felt like it was songs that were like quite reserved, like quite like, you can't get me unless you do all these things. It was less like 80s, like heart on your sleeve. It was very like, I am too cool. And it felt a little bit like everyone was almost like dating apps came into like bigger play, and everyone was scared. And I feel like just recently, I'm starting to hear lyrics that are a bit more earnest, that are a bit more like, I will make a fool of myself for you. I will play the fool for this. And I'm so happy about that. I think that that is where the greatest pop music lives. And I'm so excited that that feels like a fad that is dimming down. Because I don't want to be in a world with a lot of reserved human beings. I want everyone to just like live dramatically.
That is such a good take. I've never thought of that. But as you're saying it, I'm like, 100%.
Really?
I'll be headphones on all weekend being like, oh my God, she was right.
In thinking about what constitutes the albums on this list, all of them have like some degree of vulnerability or introspection that help drive that like more emotional connection. I don't think there's a single album on the list that doesn't have some moment of either I have a big crush or I'm like horribly heartbroken or I'm like really mad. There's a heart on your sleeve moment for every album there, including the ones that might feel a little bit more like standoffish and too cool for school. Like thinking of Brad, of course, like on Von Dutch, she's like cooler than cool. Like the course of like the rest of the album, we've got this like super danceable song about generational trauma. We've got this beautiful meditation on like being in her 30s and considering whether she might want to have a kid. We've got, you know, a song that she wrote about Sophie, these really like deep introspective themes that help complement that, those moments where she's like a little bit more like larger than life party girl.
Is there anything in the course of, in the streaming era, 2015 to present, any genres you feel like have been particularly prominent in influencing pop?
I think at the outset of the decade, there was such a massive influence from EDM. There have been years where it feels like pop is really, really heavily influenced by R&B. Years where it feels like it's super influenced by alternative music, by Latin music, by what's going on in K-pop. So it's really cool to see those genres start to like have an influence on pop artists.
When the pandemic hit, we had those big disco albums as well. So Future Nostalgia and Jessie Ware's What's Your Pleasure, which are kind of two sides of the same coin. You have the big bright pop album, and you have the more luxury adult-leaning disco of Jessie. And they were both albums that we were stuck inside looking for the dream of being in a club. And that was really when those disco moments were able to come through.
Yeah, it is interesting how like live instrumentation and big disco sounds came out of the pandemic. All right, so we've been talking a lot about pop music from 2015 to present, but I'd like to wrap up the conversation just thinking about from the present moving forward.
I'm most excited about the craft of pop songwriting and how I feel that the new generation of emerging artists are creating pop songs using an ever-widening palette of influences.
One of our favorite new pop stars, Chloe Keisha, has this incredible use of vocabulary. And hearing people be funny and witty and sassy in their songs is kind of allowing their personality to fully breathe from day one. So I've been really excited about seeing that with some of the newcomers.
I do feel like it is the era of like more authenticity than ever, and like more just different genres to play with and more ingredients to play with. I feel like true music that's actually connecting is the stuff that's authentic, and you'll find your community, whether that be large or small. And it's more that it's mighty. If there's anything I've learned in my old age of being a pop artist here, it's just you got to shoot from the heart.
As I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you explain this. I'm excited for the records that get made from that state of mind. The future seems pretty bright.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And with that, I want to thank you so much, Carly, for
thank
joining
you.
us. It means the world.
Really fun day, so thank you so much.
Don't go anywhere because we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the other albums on this list.
My must-listen pop classic is Lorde's Melodrama. In addition to the unstoppable banger of a lead single, Green Light, I would also recommend that you go back and check out the album cut Hard Feelings / Loveless, which starts out as this really sad meditation on this terrible heartbreak that she's going through, and then morphs into this really intense, almost like nursery rhyme chant at her ex. If you haven't listened to this album since its release, go check it out.
Can an album be a classic immediately? Are there instant classics?
I think for me, Short and Sweet was an instant classic because we had had Espresso, we'd had Please, Please, Please. Taste came with the album. They were three incredible pop songs that captured everything I loved and more about Sabrina, and they really set up this whole album that was cohesive and wonderful and full of her, and that made it an instant classic because it just sounded perfect immediately to me.
I think of two that were immediate classics to me. The two that come to mind are Brat, where it's like, okay, this is its thing, this is its own thing. Wherever this goes, this is meaningful. This is a classic in my book. And then Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour comes to mind. To me, that was like one listen. You're like, this album is tremendous. And whether that's going to coalesce in the pop space or in the country space, wherever this lands, this is going to mean something.
Totally. I think another great recent example of immediate classic, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess by Chappell Roan. This came out and her fans and pop fans immediately were extremely excited about it, but the commercial success piece didn't come for another year, or in the case of Pink Pony Club, since it came out well before the album, for half a decade. And it's really cool to see an album that the core pop fan base was so excited about achieve such massive success and critical acclaim.
I've got an album that I snuck into the list. You were all very kind to let me have, or I'm the only person who's heard it. Suzanne Sunfor's 10 Love Songs, and it just felt life-changing the minute you hear it.
Which of these albums on this list do you feel like had the most transformative impact to like the sonic landscape of pop music?
I mean, one that really stands out to me is the Sophie project on the list. When this came out, Sophie was a pretty avant-garde producer who had built a really devoted cult following, but had never actually shown her face. And then with this album, she officially revealed her face for the first time in the music video, It's Okay to Cry. We saw the impact from that almost immediately, most notably Brat. You can see a direct through line from Brat back to the work that Sophie did on that project.
100%, yeah.
And then I think about Lana's Norman Rockwell, which this was her stepping a little bit closer to pop, away from indie, and it was her first time working with Jack Antonoff. And they made this incredible, cohesive album that explored vintage themes of American longing and despair, but did it in this, which clearly I, as a British person, very closely associated with. But the two of them together made this album that broke the rules of pop music. Venice is a 9-minute song. It sprawls, but it maintains your attention the whole way through. And I think that maybe gave way and permission for Taylor to release All Too Well, the 10-minute version, Taylor's version from the vault, that came out in the vault version of Red. And that was Taylor without any rules. She didn't need to make a song for radio. The song had been mythologized for years and years by the fans. But Taylor, thanks to Lana, I think, was able to put out this crazy long story and it still be an incredible pop song.
So we've also been talking a lot here about like the difference between pop and hits and like how necessarily, you know, popularity isn't always endemic to what makes a classic pop album. But there are a couple albums on this list that broke a lot of records on Spotify. First thing comes to mind is Ed Sheeran Divide, which I feel like just was everywhere in 2017. There's incredible songs, but also like really captured the zeitgeist sonically, particularly Shape of You is all over the place. And I feel like a really strong bridge between the pop music of 2016 and everything that's come since. Is there anything else on the list that kind of jumps out to you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Starboy by The Weeknd was such an unbelievably massive moment for him as an artist, particularly in the pop space. Like, here's a guy who had been a cult favorite for so many years, shrouded in mystery, making these really dark, moody R&B pop songs. And it wasn't until Starboy that he really like stepped into his own as a pop star. He teamed up with Daft Punk to craft this really cool, interesting, like danceable, but still quite moody pop sound. And it really set the stage for Blinding Lights and other massive hits that would come to define his career.
Totally.
And then if we're looking at The Weeknd, the other huge superstar on the list is Rihanna and Auntie. Rihanna had obviously been making hits, but Auntie was really the album where it felt like she was less a vessel for hits and more an album artist. Created this whole very genre-blurring album, but it started with work. And it's actually on the R&B and hip-hop streaming classics list, as well as the pop list. It really lives across genres.
We would be remiss if we didn't also mention the other dupe on the hip hop and R&B classics list, which is Lemonade by Beyonce. Obviously a seminal genre blending album that deserves reflecting in both of these different spaces because it had such a massive impact, not just in R&B audiences, but in pop audiences and really music consumers as a whole. Totally. I feel like we all know where we were when Lemonade dropped.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I feel like world building and like how there's a setup to big pop albums now where you want to make sure you have the brand and the aesthetic. But I feel like Lemonade was kind of the first, I mean, it was so big. That's like the biggest that you can go in that space. But I feel like the impact of that has had reverberations on how people release albums ever since.
And then when we're thinking about iconography and world building, is there anything that's more symbolic of an album than Taylor Swift's Snake? And that was her really building the character of being an unbothered villain.
Yeah.
And everything was represented through the graphics, even if ultimately that isn't really what Reputation is about. It projected this one thing.
Totally, yeah.
And then deep within, there are these amazing love songs that actually are the story of Reputation.
I think it also speaks to, especially with these big commercial artists, how impactful the choice of a lead single can be. I think in the case of Look What You Made Me Do, a lot of folks heard that song and was like, okay, I understand what Reputation's going to be about. And it really rewarded fans who actually gave the album like a long and concerted listen.
The first two songs from the follow-up, Lover, was this dramatic switch into bright, happy pop. But then, again, once you got past that, the album was actually this twinkly, minimal electropop album, songs like The Archer and Cornelia Street, building Taylor's world in New York. But it seemed so different and such a pivot and so brash that people had to dig within to get past those initial songs and find out what the album was really about.
I mean, maybe it's part of that dichotomy between lead single and then the depth of album that is also making these albums age so well, or it's being a classic is more undeniable now than it was even right at release.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe right at release, people were talking so much about the singles that it sort of overshadows the album, because historically the singles are what we talk about in the pop space.
Totally.
So it takes some time, and culture has changed and the way we consume pop albums has changed. And now looking back, we can recognize those albums for the classics they were.
Totally. I'm going to put you on to one album from this list that I think you absolutely have to listen to, which is Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour. What reaches out to me the most are songs like Oh, What a World and Mother, which are really deep and existential and fit super well into the tapestry of this album. This album did win the Grammy for Album of the Year, and I think that got a lot more attention onto it than maybe had been there previously, but it's aged extremely well. Casey is one of the best writers of a generation, and this album is super true to form, super authentic, and super earnest. It's amazing cover to cover. Give it a listen. Just to take us home, I want to do a quick round where we go over super fast hot takes. Go.
Mine would be, pop music has always been amazing since the dawn of time, but it took emotion and the indie kids liking it for people to treat it with respect.
That's a good hot take.
It's hot.
My hot take is that pop and hits have never been more separately defined, and that's a great thing for both spaces. When we call pop its own genre, that creates an ecosystem where smaller artists and emerging artists can play in these really cool, fun pop spaces without having to chase commercial success. And on the hit side, when we just call a hit, it's a really popular song, that creates room for artists from different genres to achieve massive levels of mainstream success.
That's a great take. I think my hottest take is that classic pop is a paradox. Pop music is meant to be ephemeral. It's supposed to be of the moment. It's kind of supposed to come and go. When you capture the present moment so well that it becomes something we can look back on and remember that moment, you end up making something that's kind of timeless. So by being so good at being ephemeral, you become permanent. And I think that's crazy. I feel like we've just about covered it. Thank you both so much for this conversation. It's been super fun. And thank you for checking out Spotify Pop Classics Roundtable. Check out the full album list on Spotify, and we'll catch you next time.